All right. Well, here we are. This is going to be a recap of the 8th session of my On the Rise campaign, my 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons Egyptian based analog game. Because, like Adult, somehow I managed to delete the original video from my channel. It's okay. It's fine. I'm not going to cry. No, seriously though, yeah, it kind of sucks. And I was really pissed about it at first, but c'est la vie. So here I am, and I'm going to post this video as an incredibly poor stand-in for this missing episode. So before I get started, the first thing that I wanted to do is apologize to my players who put in a wonderful performance the night that we actually played this session. And yeah, I screwed up, guys. Sorry. But because of the wonderful Trevor Thomas, sorry, who is a player in this game and apparently who takes incredibly detailed notes, I am incredibly in his debt because they go far beyond my own notes for the session. And yeah, I'm basically just going to kind of read through the notes that he got put into my hands so that we can kind of recap what happened, and I'll interject a couple of points here and there that that I might recall. But yeah, for the most part, it's just going to be kind of going over what happened, what transpired in the story, what happened with the characters, kind of where they're going to find themselves at the beginning of session 9, and hopefully it won't suck too bad. So here we go. So immediately following the events of session 7, which included the visions that both Noctos and Sigurd had, Noctos is reflecting on his visions granted to him, as well as Sigurd, and they're trying to determine where they need to go next. Noctos and Sigurd kind of share their visions with each other and the rest of the group, and after some discussion, they conclude that their best idea is to return to the capital city of the kingdom of Baklavesh, and this city is named Mashiba. And they exit the ruins that they spent the last part of the 7th session in, and the NPC that is traveling with the party, who is the captain of their sand sailing ship, is readying the ship for the return and departure. And whenever he is finished, the crew gets together and they launch the ship southward and kind of westward back towards the several days journey that it's going to take them to reach Mashiba. And during this time, they've kind of keep their eyes peeled. You know, there's been a lot of trouble out in the sands, and they've had some run-ins with bad tribes of desert dwarves, as well as a particular blue dragon. And speaking of which, a few days into the journey, a large kind of dark shadow, winged, is moving across the dunes against the clouds movement. So it kind of draws their attention, and they end up realizing that it is Barishajet, the Glassblower, who is the blue dragon that I mentioned before. This is the dragon whom the party raided the horde of and beat and defeated its hatchling, her hatchling, only to then have the hatchling and the lion's share of the treasure stolen from them by a sand pirate by the name of Khalid. Nope. Khalid's in the party. Kaliba. See? Names, similarities. Sauron, Sauron. See what you started, JRR? God. So the glassblower lands, and Noctos attempts to warn them of the danger. Civis, the pilot of the ship in particular, And Civis has a little bit of an alcohol problem, so he doesn't really notice at first. And eventually they pull to a stop, just narrowly missing colliding with this enormous ancient blue dragon. And she confronts them and basically just wants to know where her offspring is. She informs them that she can smell the pieces of her hoard that they still have on them, and informs them that it's okay right now. They can hold on to it, but she's going to come back for it later. And basically, they have until the time that she finds her hatchling to spend the coin before she returns to collect anything and everything that was taken from her hoard. She indicates that she can smell the fact that they are godlings. They have been touched by a deity, and therefore she's willing to afford them a little bit of grace, I guess, in this instance. So she, kind of shakes them down a little bit, and then tells them that if they manage to return her offspring, that she may be willing to overlook the fact that they took things from her hoard. So with that, she then takes off, and a few nights later, they stop for some rest in some small ruins, and they set a campfire and set watch and everything for the night. And during the night, Khalid has a vision himself. He finds himself standing knee deep in an oasis lake just outside of the capital city of Meshiba. And the water is teeming with light blue ibises, but the birds themselves aren't physical. They seem to be made of radiant energy. And they take off in kind of a flock as if he kind of startled them. And they fly into the city. And he starts to notice that one at a time, these blue radiant ibises kind of become these devouring shadow type creatures that begin dive bombing the different denizens of the city and drawing the water out of their bodies, which is not unusual in the Backland culture because they practice a procedure called Menaces, which is kind of a religious rite where they reclaim the water of the dead, which then becomes property of the state, unless you could afford an actual funeral. And then you are able to will your water to whomever you choose. A lot of famous people, heroes, and rulers who are well liked or powerful, oftentimes have their water that is drinking as a delicacy by a lot of the people who can afford to do so. And a lot of people kind of feel that they somehow imbibe some of the power that this individual may have had in life. But these individuals had the moisture drawn out of them, not in a ritualistic way, but in a brutal, very quick manner. And the water was then just kind of discarded. The shadows fed on the living and were soon kind of overrunning the city of Meshiba. All of which, all except for the temple of Nerul, who is the god of death in this setting. And it also happens to be the place where the high priestess, who is kind of the most important religious figure in Meshiba, happens to work and live. This woman, Hamat Ederi, is also the woman that was seen in Sigurd's vision, and is somehow connected with all of the goings on about Senruflares, the god of the undead, and whatever's going on with all of that business. So they're kind of seeking her out for answers. So it's kind of strange that the Temple of Nerul seems to be unmolested by this strange form of undead that seems to arise from very quickly killing the living and then passing itself on like a plague. Khalid kind of shares his vision with Rith around the fire, and Rith, who had been sleeping, only catches the tail end of it and somehow manages to believe that it was a vision that he had, and they confer that the temple is the destination that they should seek out. So Noctos ends up taking the last watch for that evening, and about the time that the sun is kind of rising on up over the horizon, he actually hears a whisper on the wind as the night winds in the desert kind of start to die down to the heat of the day. And he hears the whisper say, "Seek the heads of the dead, find the masks of those who serve my husband." He mentions this to the party, and they have some differing thoughts as to what it might mean, but they do agree that it's most likely sending them onward towards Meshiba and the Temple of Nerul. But some of them believe that it may be a message from Yabala, who is the goddess of water, while others seem to be thinking that it might be Strona, the goddess of wife, the goddess of life, even. I know words, the best words. And both Strona and Yabala are wives of Nerul in the mythology of the Backlands. Nerul was married to Yabala at first, the goddess of water, and she could not bear him a child. So he kind of cast her aside and lost interest with her. And so she kind of lost interest with his people, the people that he was the patron deity of, which are the Backlands, which kind of describes why their land is so barren and dry. And she kind of moved her attentions and domains to the east, which is a fertile river valley that floods once a year. The people believing that this is a kind of a way of her making amends, of bringing her boons to the people that she has forsought. Forsaken, forsought, potato, whatever. So, Nerul then married Strona, the goddess of life, and she was able to bear him a son, who is Sinrufares, and he is the god of the undead, the twisted one, the first unborn. Not a very nice guy. And Yabala, who our party's cleric actually worships, kind of feels that he's probably up to no good, doesn't trust him, never has, and has kind of charged the party with finding out what exactly he's up to. So they decide to press on to Meshiba, and as they're kind of arriving, finally, they find kind of a terrible sight spread out before them. It's the city itself is on fire, and there's bodies and blood kind of scattered all over the place. The front gates of the city are left standing wide open, and it's almost like a flood of corpses had kind of spilled forth from the front gates. But everyone's valuables are left lying where they fell, so it's very obviously not plunder. It's not any kind of raiders or pillagers of any kind. It's something else, cold-blooded murder. And they actually see from their vantage point as they get a little closer that some of the corpses are actually up and shambling about. So they decide to skirt the outside of the city and actually find an old smuggler's tunnel that the party's rogue. Oh, he may not actually be a rogue. He's sneaky. Whatever. So the sneaky party member knows about an old smuggler's tunnel that he used to use in and out of the city near one of the side gates. So they sail around to that other gate, and they use the smuggler's tunnel to kind of come into the city, about a mile or so, I think, into the city. and come up in the latrine of the orphanage. Not my idea. Sometimes when you toss the ball to your players, this is the kind of stuff they come up with. But I just rolled with it and said, sure, why not? You guys want to crawl around in that kind of stuff? Whatever. So they came up in this latrine in the orphanage, and they heard dwarven voices from somewhere else within the building. And a couple of the party members were able to understand dwarven and basically determined that they were discussing being trapped here in the city and needing to find a way out, that the situation seemed pretty dire and grim. And they kind of announced themselves, the party does, to this other group of individuals, and offer to exchange information effectively. They want to know more about kind of what's going on in the city and what may be going on between the orphanage and the Temple of Nerul, so that they might traverse that section of the city carefully. And they figure that they have a way out that this band of trapped individuals may be interested in. So they decide to negotiate further and actually enter the room with one another. And Noctos, who is the Mahan, the desert dwarves, he is the party's cleric. He has a rivalry. His clan, more appropriately, has a rivalry with another clan of Mahan named the Megrin, who are the Scorpion clan. And lo and behold, these individuals are members of the Megrin clan. So tension immediately kind of starts to build and rise a little bit, but they're being civil. There are, dead bodies kind of stacked in the corner that are dried husks, some of which are members of the Megrin themselves. And the Megrin's leader, a dwarf by the name of Or Azor, man, sometimes just the tongue doesn't want to do what it's supposed to do. Aur Urzar. There you go. This is why you don't make up your own names, people. It's a trap. It's a trap. So their leader tells them that he was forced to kill two of his own men because they had been bitten by this undead type. And basically they had to put them down. So they go on kind of exchanging information with one another, and they can see that this room has been fortified. A lot of the cots have been kind of turned onto their sides. And one of the things that they notice about this room as they're kind of bantering back and forth is that there's a circular opening on one of the walls, and it doesn't fit the architecture. It breaks the pattern of stonework. There's not a decorative trim to the opening in any way. And this is a little odd, but for the moment, they don't really seem to pay too much attention. But then they hear kind of a mewing call from inside that room, and that piques their curiosity, but they just continue talking until it happens again. And then Noctos attempts to step towards it and is kind of bodily blocked by our Ozar. And he basically tells him it's none of his business, back off, that machismo stuff. And Noctos just kind of bullies past him and manages to look inside this oddly shaped room that seems to be painted black on the inside. And there's various pieces of treasure undoubtedly gathered from the homes and the people and things here in Meshiba. But the most important part is the blue dragon hatchling that is situated in the middle of this little offshoot, this little room. And, well, the leader of the Mahan takes a particular insult to the fact that he wasn't listened to and brandishes his weapon at Noctos, who doesn't take that very well, and a fight breaks out. So they tussle with one another, and it goes very well for the party. I think at some point Khalid ends up going down. He gets knocked to the ground, and these Mahan, aside from the leader, wield these kind of onyx bladed battle axes that seem to cut really easily and do a lot of damage. But Sigrid, the paladin in the party, manages to kind of take on two of them at once decently well, using her shield to kind of knock them onto their asses and push them around a little bit, kind of control the room, while Khalid and Noctos took care of the leader. And then meanwhile, in the hall just outside the door, Rith, who is a druid, shapeshifted into a medium-sized scorpion. I'm sure he thought that was very ironic, and in fact, so did the dwarf that he was fighting. And the two of them kind of fought out in the hallway while the rest of the room resolved itself. The fight kind of died down, moved into the hall, and they quickly finished off that last Mahan. And just about the time that they dropped him, the front door of this orphanage busts in, and the undead, who are called the Unleashed right now, this version of them, they start pouring in through the front door. And that is where we stopped the session. So it was a nice, juicy cliffhanger ending, and I'm really, really excited to get back to it with our session 9. And yeah, I mean, that's all pretty much as far as the story goes. I was really, really upset whenever I deleted that video, way more than I have any reason to be. But it really got to me, and I stewed on it for a day or two, and trying to figure out a way to get it restored. And everything that I found basically said that it just wasn't possible. So I was really bummed out about it. But the same player that provided me with all of these notes, that helped me kind of do this recap, also sent me a little message. And I thought it was a pretty good quote. So I'm going to throw that in here as well. And again, thank you very much, Trevor, for keeping such detailed notes and helping me out with this. So the tidbit that he sent me that kind of helped was, "Oft are the tales of heroes that go unknown to all except those who live them." I thought that was very appropriate, very fitting, and it helped. It kind of helped soothe the burn a little. But I don't really know that I've got a whole lot more to put on this video. There's surprisingly a couple of people who have tuned in even. So it looks like we've got Jason and Alan and Garth. Thank you, gentlemen, very, very much for stopping by and saying hello. So, guys, I don't think I've got much else. It's a sad replacement. It's a sad substitute. But it's just going to have to do. So until session 9 happens, may your dice roll high and your snacks always be within reach.